If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
Fighting words in French. What's up? This is EJ Stewart, joined by Tommy Beer. This is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, an Audacy WFAN original. We got a lot to get to on this episode. Evan Fournier speaks out about his time on the Knicks last season. He's very unhappy. He talked about some of the frustrations he dealt with, not just with just the situation of not playing very much, being taken out of the rotation, but also his relationship with Tom Thibodeau. We'll give you his thoughts on that and what he's expecting for this upcoming year. Also, you probably saw the story of QJ Peterson. He's a G League, he was a summer league player for the Knicks that kind of made waves with his story, essentially, of what it was like to be a summer league player for the New York Knicks. It was a very fascinating tale. So I want to talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about the end of the summer league. The Knicks finishing 2-3, losing their final game, a close game to the Nuggets. And finally, I feel like we're back in 2020 all over again, because we're once again talking to 2021, I guess, because we're talking about this Trae Young Knicks fandom situation. And Draymond Green, of all people, decided to insert his opinion on Knicks fans and everything that goes with it. So we'll have a friendly chat about that later on in the show. Tommy Beer again joins me as always, and this is the Orange and Blue Bloods. We'll have more on that in just a second. So once again, Tommy Beer joins me as always. And Tommy, I'd be remiss not to also mention, I'm sure you probably saw, as most people did, Joel Embiid talking about, I may want to win a championship here in Philly or elsewhere. Any thoughts on that before we get started on this beautiful day here?
Yeah, maybe we can discuss a little bit more in depth later in the week on the pod. But it's interesting. I think it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Obviously, these kind of offhand comments, I think, were relatively innocuous. You could see it's not difficult to foresee a scenario in which Embiid gets a little more vocal, a little more spicy. He's a kind of a flamboyant entertainer by nature. So I'm sure he doesn't like to be quiet and sit on his hands. And if, how this situation with the Sixers and the standoff between Harden and Daryl Morey and the organization plays out. But there is a scenario in which things get a little ugly in the city of brotherly love. And Embiid at some point could ask to get moved. The reason Knicks fans are so interested in that potential scenario is if that situation comes to pass, the Knicks will be the heavy odds-on favorites to land Embiid. Given the relationship between Leon Rose, number one, and number two, the Knicks have arguably the best combination of assets: draft capital, future draft, first-round draft picks, and young players on rookie scale contracts, and good players, veteran. You add all those factors in, kind of the four pillars of the superstar trade, and the Knicks have all of it, and are basically waiting to kind of consolidate all those assets into one deal, one player. There's a lot of reasons to believe Embiid would be that guy, would make sense. Sixers won't want to do it, but again, as we've seen in the past, when a team or when a player demands a trade, the team loses a lot of leverage. Ask the Blazers how that turns. How that goes. So we'll see. A lot to keep an eye on.
It is, yeah. I thought it was interesting. In some ways, it felt like him dipping his toe in the not saying, "Oh, I want to be out here," and he was dipping his toe, just to let people know, "Hey, there's a future out there that maybe doesn't include me winning a championship in Philadelphia," which is very possible. Because how many players finish their career in one place? So. But I think he understands the ramifications of him saying that, and they tried to walk the dog with all his trolling or whatever. I don't think he was trolling. I think that he was being very real. I think he was thinking in his head, looking at where the team is at, looking at Harden is where I can be out the door, and that the Sixers perhaps will be taking a step back this year. That whether it's him demanding a trade or in a couple of years, they've decided it's best to rebuild and try to trade him. Who knows? Like a Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert thing. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. So I think he's being real. He was being real there, and maybe he got a little too real, and that ended up causing all these headlines. But it definitely would be something to follow. By the way, Vegas already setting the Knicks as the betting odds favorite to land Joel Embiid.
And one other comment on that, just this afternoon on 97.5 FM, Morey was on the radio, said, quote, "If we don't get either a very good player or something we can turn into a very good player, we're not going to do it." speaking on the potential
Yep.
James Harden deal. So, as you expect, Morey is one to keep his chips close to his vest and will play poker and will remain there. Be the last one at the table. He's not gonna. He's very hesitant to give a player away, even if it seems like it's best to cut losses. He has shown in the past a unwillingness to do that, and Harden has also shown an unwillingness to be a happy camper when he's not a happy camper. So, interesting situation to keep an eye on out in Philly.
Yeah, this is one of those, kind of like two bulls kind of locking horns here in terms of what they're known for. Harden is an expert at getting himself out of the place, and Daryl Morey is an expert of holding on to assets to get the absolute most for them. We saw that with the Ben Simmons situation that brought James Harden there. He's a very aggressive, very difficult trade partner to work with, much like Danny Ainge, as the Knicks learned last season. So buckle up. That whole situation in Philly could be very interesting in a couple of weeks or a couple of months when training camp gets underway. But again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast and Audacy WFAN original podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit that auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. You can find the full episodes on the WFAN channel. So let's begin with Evan Fournier. The Knicks guard opens up about his frustrations with the Knicks and his desire to be traded. In an interview with a French sports newspaper, Fournier said he has no relationship with head coach Tom Thibodeau. He added, when he took me out of the starting five, he just told me he was going to try something else. Then at the first match of a road trip, he announced to me that I was leaving the rotation, and ciao, which is, again, not French, but get the picture there. He said the benching initially made him spiteful before shifting his focus more in terms of like an off season of mindset to his, training, his conditioning. He didn't work so much on his skill work as much as it was cardio and lifting and things like that. He had basically said his season was over. And he said, quote, "You want to spit on everyone. You have hatred." Derrick Rose and I looked at each other and said to each other, "What the hell are we doing here?" During the 5-on-5 practice, we were on the side like some prospects. Uncool times. So he also finally questioned the Knicks' approach as well when it comes to his situation, since the Knicks are obviously definitely open for business when it comes to shopping Evan Fournier. He said, "If you want to trade me with a good return, why didn't you use me? I was coming out of a season where I was the fourth best three-point shooter in the league. Why not take advantage of it? Now they won't get anything interesting, and that's normal because I couldn't show anything on the court." So a lot coming from Evan Fournier on this random Tuesday as we record this podcast. Tommy, are Evan Fournier's gripes about the Knicks fair in your eyes?
Yeah, so let me start here. The Knicks made the right decision by benching Evan Fournier. Tom Thibodeau made the right decision by benching Evan Fournier. Started the season with him as a starting shooting guard, maybe gave him the benefit of the doubt, hoping that a backcourt combination of Jalen Brunson and Fournier could work. Unsurprisingly, it did not. Defensively, torn threads. Knicks started the season out slowly. After starting the season, the starting lineup, Fournier went to the bench, played terribly off the bench. Somewhat understandably, it's a difficult transition. A guy that's been starting for the vast majority of his career, coming in playing 12 minutes a night, 10 minutes, 16 minutes a night, and a shooter. Never found his rhythm. Never, felt comfortable in that role, and contributed to the Knicks, to Tibbs eventually demoting him completely and him banishing him from the rotation altogether. Knicks, obviously, with more Quentin Grimes, opened up more minutes for Grimes, a far superior defensive player, opened up more minutes for quickly, a more versatile offensive player, a better defender. Opened up the floor for McBride, a few minutes here and there. Not as good offensively, obviously, as Fournier, but a better defense player. And the results spoke for themselves. Knicks posted one of the best records in the NBA over the final 60-plus games of the season, and was in the pudding. So the Knicks did what was best for them, the organization. Understandably, Evan Fournier wants what's best for him and his family. He wants to play. He wants to have his value. He's a proud athlete. You don't get to the NBA, from a small town in France without having incredible self-confidence and believe yourself that, you can shoot your way out of any slump, that you're so good offensively that, you can be even if you're adequate defensively, you can help a team win. He's coming off a season in which he set the the Knicks franchise record for most 3-pointers. Was one of very few players in the NBA to attempt over 4+ threes a game and shoot over 40% from 4. So yes, is Evan Fournier's gripes, fair? Absolutely. Was the Knicks' decision to bench him the right decision? In my opinion, yes, absolutely. And the fact and the record would kind of bear those facts out. This happens in professional sports when we're seeing it right now with how the Blazers try to handle the Davis situation. Obviously, Lillard's a Hall of Fame player, and it's not the same. But you have at its core an organization that sometimes interests aren't perfectly aligned. Dame wants to win now. He wants them to trade Stuart Henderson for a player that's going to help him this season. The Blazers understand they don't win a championship by trading Stuart Henderson, then they're really up the creek without a paddle with paying a 35-year-old Dame Lillard $60 million to be a nice the conference. While it's some of the quotes are kind of obviously going to draw a lot of headlines, it's not surprising. Fournier said as much in his exit interview the last time he talked to the media at the after the postseason run ended, saying he didn't expect to be back. Now it's a little more colorful anecdotes, but the crux of his feelings are unsurprising. But there's nothing they can do about it, and the Knicks are paying him $18.9 million to kind of be a good soldier. So we'll see how it plays.
Yeah, I mean, look, from Evan's standpoint, as I saw someone say on Twitter, and it's true. I mean, he's trying to save his career. I think it was actually Ben Rickles. So shout out to him. He's been on the podcast before. We got to get him on again soon. This is his last ditch effort, and he kind of said it in this interview. He said, "Look, you can go 1 year in the league without getting a lot of playing time at my age, whatever, but 2 years and expecting to still have a long career left ahead of you, very unlikely. Considering he has a contract coming up next year." He's right about that. If he has another year where he's out of a rotation somewhere, he's probably looking at a veteran minimum contract on his next deal for 1 year. And essentially, it's, go out there and show why you should still stay in the league. And he doesn't want to be in that position. So this is a lot of self-preservation here. So I get it from that standpoint. I do think that we should actually hear from Tom Thibodeau because he actually spoke about Evan Fournier's comments today. This is what he had to say.
My actions don't require any defense. In the same situation, I do it again.
That was Batman. That was not Tom Thibodeau. But I'm sure that's what Tom Thibodeau would say if we asked Tom Thibodeau what he thinks about what Evan Fournier had to say on this. Now, here's what I'll say. Like you said, the Knicks made the right move to bench him. He was not playing well when he was playing. He was a terrible fit with their star player, Jalen Brunson. And the team saw reap the benefits of that decision. Like, he went out of the rotation and the Knicks thrived. And I was one who thought he could have been a potential good player off the bench, a 6-7 man role, but he showed that he could not play in that role. I felt mentally he just wasn't there, and you could tell when he was playing. It wasn't right as soon as he got pulled out of the starting lineup. And when we talk about being a good pro, and he was a good pro when it came to not causing waves during the season at any point. But part of being a good pro is also being able to still play at a high level when they tell you, hey, we need you to move you to the bench. And he, to me, I think mentally couldn't handle that role. He couldn't handle not being in the starting line, which I don't know why. It's not like this is Carmelo Anthony we were talking about, who also had issues with not wanting to go to the bench. This is Evan Fournier, a guy who's a fringe starter to begin with. But him being unable to kind of fill that 20-minute role, that 15-minute role, made him unplayable. So Tibbs did what he had to do. I think it's interesting that, he talked about, Tibbs really didn't say much to him. We kind of heard a similar thing from Kemba Walker. Two seasons ago when he was talking about his situation. He said, coach really didn't say much to me. He just kind of said, okay, I'm out of the rotation. That was it. I don't know how much that, I mean, does he owe it to the veteran to sit them down and have a more longer conversation with them? I guess. But I don't know if that really is going to say anything much to me about Tibbs, that he didn't have a more extensive conversation. I mean, Evan Fournier's numbers spoke for themselves. He didn't play well. And that was probably the only thing about these comments that I felt were missing. I wish there would have been some accountability from Evan to say, hey, I started that year really poorly this season, and I got beat out. Like at the end of the day, Quentin Grimes beat him out of that starting spot. And then he got beat out of the rotation by guys like Deuce McBride, guys who were out there and actually provided something the Knicks needed. So I don't really buy a lot of what he was saying in that regard, but I understand, and I could have sympathy or empathy with the fact that he's trying to save his career. So this is what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a defensive Tibbs, I mean, listen, again, the guy made $18 million. So
Right.
it's hard to feel too bad. You get paid to show up and do your job. Sometimes Fournier obviously assumed, heading into the season, his job would be playing 32 minutes a night and taking 14 shots and 7 threes a night. That wasn't his job, as it turned out. His job was to cheer on Deuce McBride and mentor, and kind of show Brunson the ropes about his adjusting to his first year in New York and, taking the guys out to a restaurant, making the team better, practicing really hard. I didn't love the comments he made about how he kind of went into off-season mode after he got pulled from rotation, basically saying got some shots up. But
thank God we didn't need him because he would have been useless. He said he wasn't really working out in the team. The Philly game, which was the best game of the year, when he went crazy. He was like, yeah, I usually skip the national anthem, and I don't really do the pregame workouts. So I'm just like, what the hell? You don't do pregame warm-ups? Like,
right. I mean, that's the thing. You get paid to show up and be ready, even though you very likely won't play. You cash a check, a very a decent sized check to be ready. Should RJ Barrett show up, say, listen, a stomach bug, or Jalen Brunson say, listen, my ankle's not feeling great, or same thing with Grimes, you don't, or twist his ankle in the halfway through this quarter, you got that's his job to be ready. And Tibbs and the coaching staff watch who practices hard, who keeps himself in shape, who prepares like a pro. So if obviously the situation didn't go as you had hoped from December through January, but if you keep working, maybe the Knicks go into a losing streak in February and you get a chance to, get thrown back in the mix. If you're not preparing the right way, that's going to greatly reduce the chances you'll have an opportunity to prove yourself and kind of resuscitate your career.
It was interesting that he said that, both him and Rose were kind of sitting on that bench wondering, what the hell going on here. So both guys feeling like, they should have been playing. And, they're older guys. Maybe they felt like, hey, we got, we kind of got a short leash here. Like, we should have got a lot longer of a leash. You got to kind of get warmed up into the season. Maybe that was the case, but the Knicks season was falling down the toilet. Like, it had to be saved. I mean, we started this podcast essentially with the Knicks in the midst of a losing streak and wondering where the team's going to go after this season because it looked like it was going to end as another lottery appearance.
And you talk about guys trying to save their career. Tibbs had to save his job. He was on.
That is true too. I forgot about that. You're right about that. Yeah.
His job was teetering, and if he stuck with Fournier because he deserves to, because he's veteran or whatever the case might be, he might be out of a job.
Yeah. So there was some self-preservation from Tibbs there as well. So yeah, I mean, look, Evan, again, I think for the most part, he's been a good guy. I don't look at these comments and say, oh, he's a bad guy for this. Again, like, he's trying to save his job. And he's an athlete. Like, any athlete who's been in a situation where you feel like you should be playing and you're sitting on the bench and you got to try to still be a good teammate. It's hard. It's not easy. We're going to talk about it a little bit in a second with QJ Peterson. It's not easy at all. So I don't really hold anything against Evan. I just feel like in some ways, again, there was really not much accountability with like his poor play. Like the fact that like, yeah, you made the fourth best in 3-pointers last year, but like you were one of the worst defensive players in the league last year. And you think, okay, maybe this year you come in, focus more on the defensive end. You came out and you were worse defensively this year. Like, and then you didn't shoot the ball well. So now you're not shooting well and you're not playing defense. Like, what do you want them to do? Like, do you think you're entitled to playing time? Like, maybe he thought that with like the contract he had signed. Maybe he did. Like, some guys around the league probably feel like you signed this kind of money after playing this amount of time. But look at a guy, Duncan Robinson. That's a guy that signed a $100 million contract and was completely out of the Miami rotation for a whole year. Like, it was a lost year for Duncan Robinson last year. Then this year, he only got playing time because guys got hurt. But, like, he came back ready to play, ready to contribute. Wasn't as terrible defensively as he was prior to the previous season, which is why he got taken out of the rotation. Like, he could have taken that approach, but Fournier didn't seem willing to do that. And it brings me to one last thing. It does make me kind of, like, curious. Like, when he talks about, like, they're 5-on-5, weren't even playing. Tibbs is a practice guy. So if he thinks you're not really giving it your all in forms, so I feel like he's probably like, well, I'm not going to put you out there and practice and competing with guys I want to actually play. But then the second thing, too, is we used to always complain about why, like, Rose and Fournier were above, like, playing in garbage time because he would have Quickly out there and Toppin out there, guys who actually were playing, and it seemed like a risk. I wonder if maybe he didn't want to give these guys any time, considering maybe how unserious they were with their preparation.
Yeah, I want to talk about Rose in a sec. Kind of his connection with Fournier, but on Fournier though, I think it's important to note, and I brought this up, time and again when we've talked about basically at the end of the season. I do think there's I don't want to say, I'll say a good chance, better than 51% chance that Fournier is on the Knicks opening roster. Yes, even after these comments, because again, he's going to make $18.2 million this upcoming 23-24 season. In the NBA, especially under the new CBA, having salary filler in a larger deal becomes important. As we've talked about, the return of the valuable expiring contract looks like it's going to resurface starting this season going forward. So if and when Joel Embiid tweets out, "I'm through," and not just in a trolling way, or as we talked about, any of the other stars, the Giannis's, the Doncic down the line, again, unlikely, but there's still a chance, especially particularly with the Embiid scenario. You're going to need to match salaries when you're a hard capped team. They theoretically could trade him to a team like the Spurs and create a traded player exception, which is essentially an expiring contract. But now the Spurs have less than $15 million in cap space, so that's not as likely as it once was. Again, there's a lot of ways to make the math work. By buying out Evan Fournier doesn't mean you automatically clue yourself from trading for a star. That's not the case. It just makes it easier and more likely if you have that $18 million in expiring contract that includes the trade and kind of match up the salaries. It just makes the math work. It makes the puzzle fit together. So that's that's one thing to know. And so I think he could start the season. I think he could be a Knick right up until midnight of the trade deadline. Then at that point, if and when he doesn't get traded, or RJ Barrett doesn't have a season-ending injury, Grimes doesn't, miss 3 months or something. Anything can happen. All of a sudden, hey, Tibbs, let me give you a hug. Okay, players have said a lot worse and been welcomed back when the team needs them to play, and a player wants to play to increase his fantasy value. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent 12 months from now. So all that said, there's definitely a path here where remember the Knicks, whether he's actually with the team or he does the Jay Crowder thing where he sits at home and waits for a trade. And again, the Suns eventually flipped Crowder for 4 second round picks. As far as the Rose thing, there's a reason. Again, these guys are proud athletes. Rose is a former MVP. You don't want, those guys expect to play. They think they're above coming in at the last 2 minutes of a game. And there's a reason they're an MVP because of that pride. And I forget what the quote was and who said it, but essentially the thinking is if you're a coach, you can have one good player unhappy on your team, as long as there's just one, because if there's two, then they talk with each other and it can cause a ripple effect.
Yeah, there you go.
And animosity that can spread. But if it's just one guy, again, Rose hasn't said anything. He's not going to say anything. Now he signs a new deal. That's what I would suggest Fournier do. Everybody knows he's unhappy. It's no surprise, but it's probably best not to say anything. Again, his resentment is understandable.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. My theory, I think Evan Fournier said this because he probably heard that he's probably going to be on the team this year.
Yep.
He probably heard that there's not a deal on the horizon. Now he's like, well, I got something to maybe get this ball rolling. So let me throw this little grenade in here and see what happens. But I don't think it will change much. There is no deal out there for the Knicks that makes sense right now. So he's going to be on the team, and we'll see how things shake. I think he'll end up being one of those guys that ends up getting sent home, like I said last week. I think he'll be in a Jay Crowder situation this year. But Evan Fournier, nonetheless, letting his voice be heard about how he feels about the situation with the Knicks. So, Summer League is now over for the Knicks as the team finished 2-3 following a win over the Celtics on Friday, where 2022 second-round pick Trevor Keels had his best performance as a Knicks, scoring 20 points on 7 of 10 shooting. Charlie Brown at 27 in that game. And then they had a close loss to the Nuggets on Saturday, despite overcoming a 17-point deficit. QJ Peterson was a star in that one. He had 25 points in the game. 28-year-old guard then went viral with his journal, essentially a journal post he posted to Instagram about his time at Summer League. And it was very captivating. Obviously, I cannot read the whole thing here because it's very long, but I suggest everybody go out there and check it out if you just are interested in basketball or interested in the mindset of an athlete. I think it's a really great read. But Peterson's, among other things, talked about how Tom Thibodeau gave him personal advice following the end of the mini camp that he was invited to about what it took to make it to the NBA. Tibbs saying, I know you're a scorer, but I need you to focus on, being a defender, being a guy who's going to play with effort, play with hustle, play with energy. Like that's what you're going to need if you're going to be a 6-foot guard in the league. He also was initially told he probably wouldn't play much. He had to make the decision about whether or not he should actually join the team, knowing that he probably wouldn't play much. And then again, another interesting Tibbs story. Apparently Tibbs, after the second game the Knicks lost, told Dice in front of the team, hey, you guys are playing some of these older guys because, we got to try to win some games too here. It's not all about development. So we learned a little bit about Tibbs in this story he said, and QJ talking about himself, saying that he had essentially transitioned his game, a guy who's a big-time scorer playing in college at VMI, playing overseas in various different leagues, changed himself from a scorer to more of an energy effort guy. And this is how he finished the post, or one of the last paragraphs. I'll read this part. He said, I turned a lot of eyes with different NBA teams at some leagues solely off of my energy and effort and affecting the game in a positive way by just playing hard, showing your attitude, and being a great teammate and leader. He adds, no matter where you come from, no matter your height, whether you're a 5-star athlete or a no-star athlete, always bet on yourself, always be ready so you don't have to get ready, and be a great teammate in person. Do all the little things because the little things matter. Find your why that makes you bigger than yourself to help you keep going when things get tough. So very inspirational words there from QJ Peterson. Before we get to this final thoughts on the summer league, what did you think of QJ's story?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, just the way we set up the rundown, unintentionally, there's a big contrast between QJ Peterson's comments and Fournier's comments.
Yeah.
But part of that is, again, being a 6-foot undersized, shooting guard. Like Lil Wayne said, either be good or be good at it. And Fournier was good for a long time. And it's difficult to kind of adjust your expectations. Whereas a guy like Duncan Robinson, played Division III, not recruited at high school, and it's easier to kind of accept the get benched and demoted. Whereas Fournier was viewed himself as an all-star level player, first-round pick. Star of his national team, a team that featured Bam, Batum, and a lot of other, really, really talented players. So it's difficult to kind of make that adjustment. But as far as the QJ Peterson, yes, I can't recommend it highly enough. Read the full, the full. Google his name; it'll be out there. It's out there. I wrote about it in my newsletter on Monday, and I pasted the full text. Because the reason I found it so interesting, it was kind of we rarely get kind of a peek behind the curtain, get to see kind of how the sausage is made in terms of these guys on the fringes of NBA rosters. And I mean, that's why the Hard Knocks has been such a big hit. It'll be interesting, obviously, with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. And the big story is always, when when it's the Jets, the highlight is, what'll Aaron Rodgers say? Or, when it's the Cowboys, it's Dak Prescott. When my Lions were on last year, it's like what happens with Adrian Hutchinson. When it's actually Malcolm Rodriguez, a linebacker they drafted in the 5th round, that kind of was the storyline that drew people in. It's that guy that's the 53rd man on the roster. Whereas if he makes the team, he's a millionaire, and his friends and family and everyone's proud of him, and he has tickets to the game. And if he's the last guy on the outside of that practice squad looking in, he has to work at a gas station for a couple of weeks and train. Those are the type of things. It's like, and that's what sport is so beautiful about. Chichi Rodriguez has a quote: "A putt to win the Masters isn't pressure. A $50 putt, have $5 in your pocket at your local country club. That's pressure. It's that type of thing. And that's why those stories are so compelling. And Peterson kind of gave us a glimpse into what life is like. Again, even if he likely he's not going to get signed by the Knicks, maybe he gets a contract to compete and can't. But he's a dude that averaged 27, 6, and 3 in the CBA last year and made pretty decent bank. But again, obviously the goal of these guys is to make it to the NBA, because no matter how good you are in the CBA, the folks you went to high school with and all the girls you want to impress that you went to VMI with are not going to see you on national TV unless you make it to the big leagues.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the part of it that struck out to me. I agree, was kind of the inside baseball, so to speak, in terms of just like we know the first round picks who are on the summer league team. We know even the second year guys who on the team. But these are 12-man rosters. Like, who the hell are some of these other guys? Now, I love college basketball, so like I kind of know a lot of these guys, but like I haven't seen them in years. You know, some of these guys maybe were in the NBA for a couple of years and then haven't been away. So kind of figuring like QJ Peterson's situation, like I didn't know he was this good over in the CBA. And that the Knicks had told him, hey, like, we know you can make a lot of money, like, you know, playing overseas. You can make six figures playing overseas, maybe $1 million. Like, if you don't want to do this, like, we understand. And like the fact that NBA teams have to like juxtapose that when putting guys on their roster, like, is it even worth going after some of these guys who maybe have talent to fill out a summer league roster, knowing that they have much more lucrative options elsewhere? But I think what we've seen it is QJ's attitude, which is, you know, he's a positive guy, a guy who wasn't going to allow, you know, the circumstances of perhaps not getting enough time and not being able to showcase his talents the way he thought, not let that get in his head or not let that make him become a bad teammate. In fact, it's probably the reason why he actually started getting playing time, because, you know, apparently Tibbs really liked seeing how he was working hard in practice during the defensive slide drills. Like, you know, it's very much, it almost felt like I was like reading the script for Hustle, you know, but the American version. Like, this is really what it felt like. So I was really happy QJ Peterson put this out there. I wonder how that Knicks feel about him putting this out there. This was like very, very like detailed. Like, you know, like Knicks are very close to the vest kind of group.
Yes.
So I kind of wonder how they feel about this.
I was wondering that as well. I mean, ideally, especially of all teams, the Knicks don't want anything inside the locker room to leak in any way, shape, or form. They are the tightest, close to the best team you can possibly imagine. Other teams are willing and happy.
Besides the Patriots, maybe they're the most in sports.
Yep, absolutely. And it starts from the top down. Dolan has a policy which is very, confrontational with the media and almost searching out ways to annoy and bother and make it difficult for the media to do their job. And listen, that's right. And what we can argue, and we've talked about, does it benefit the team? No. Does it really hurt the team? Probably not. But it couldn't hurt to be a little more media savvy. Bill Belichick, was celebrated for, the way he's handled things for the better part of 2 decades. Now he does have Tom Brady. Things are a little bit different. It was all good when he could tell stars to go scratch if they didn't want to play exactly like he is. Now he has Mac Jones, and did that attitude cost them DeAndre Hopkins? And how does these final few years, how will it reflect on Bill Belichick's career as a whole? Probably not all that much, because his legacy is cemented. But all that being said, that's kind of part of a lot of the conversation. But I think of that as well. Like, in my mind, this probably made it less likely he would make an NBA team, for fear of even the slightest bit of him should things go sideways if he's the 15th man and then they cut him. Does he bash the organization, or just not even bash, but just be blunt about, just brutally honest about his experiences? Teams do not want you to be honest. They want
they train guys to lie to the media.
literally to control the narrative. There's classes that they force these guys to take.
There you go.
But again, for a guy like Peterson, probably didn't have that much to lose, and luckily benefited from it.
Yeah. Again, I'm happy he did it. I get the feeling that he probably knew he didn't have much to lose, so he's like, why not do this? And now he's become, a name that people now will recognize. They'll remember for a little bit. Like nobody's gonna forget. People who read this story, they'll remember that guy. Oh yeah, right, that Knicks summer league player. So he probably did himself favors. Who knows with content creation is happening, how much that maybe he could benefit from doing this thing. I kind of now would love to see him like do a blog or whatever on like his like time in the CBA. Like, what is that like? I don't know what it's like playing in the Chinese Basketball Association. Maybe he could fill us in. Like, he's one of the best players over there, so that would be interesting. Any final thoughts on the Knicks summer league as a whole? Again, we got to see Keels play a little better as it went on. Charlie Brown continued to impress throughout. Any final thoughts as summer league wraps for the Knicks?
Yeah, so on the positive note, I thought Brown was obviously really impressive. Finished Summer League, played in 4 games out the 5th contest, averaged 19.8 points, 6.3 boards, 2.3 threes, almost 2 blocks and 2 steals a game. Shot almost 50% floor, over 37% from downtown, 80% from the free throw line. I was looking at the numbers earlier this week. There were only 2 players in Vegas to average more than 19 points, more than 6 rebounds, and more than 2 threes per game. It was Charlie Brown and Jabari Smith. So I thought that was noteworthy. As we've discussed, the Knicks have 14 players under contract currently, which is 1 short of the 15-player maximum. So I wouldn't be shocked if Charlie Brown earns his way on to the roster as kind of that 15th spot. Obviously, the backup power forward spot is kind of the position of need in terms of who the Knicks are going to bring in. But I wouldn't be shocked to see, in a pinch if Brown could play some 4. We know that Obi Toppin basically stood in the corner and shot threes and was used as a cutter. Defensively, Brown's a 6'6" wing, so he might have a tough time guarding power forward. But Obi wasn't a good defender either. So we'll see how it all plays out. That was the positive. Isaiah Roby kind of probably falls somewhere in the middle. Important to note, he was only 2 weeks removed from being cleared from a significant ankle injury. Didn't look great. Didn't improve his chances of, he probably would have preferred to play better and kind of make a case as the guy that enters camp as the odds-on favorite to be the primary backup behind Randall. I don't think that's the case right now. But again, he'll have plenty of time in training camp, preseason games to kind of make his case. Jalen Martin, the teenager they drafted out of Overtime Elite, showed some flashes, showed his rawness. Overall played well. I think the Knicks are happy. Obviously a name we'll keep an eye on and keep you guys updated. We'll check in periodically during the G League season, see how he's playing. And then probably the guy most people were interested in, kind of the most eyeballs on, Trevor Keels. Really no other way to put it other than, as on a whole, played well in this game, but a whole disappointing. Remarkably inefficient. The Knicks experimented playing him at a point guard the first few games. That obviously didn't work. They shut him off the ball. Looked a little more comfortable, but finished up his time in Vegas, averaging basically 10, 3, and 3. 42% from the floor, 33% from downtown, 40% from the free throw line. Didn't impress. Didn't show that pop. Is a bit of a tweener. Doesn't fit in at either position. Really, the unfortunate take is the Knicks will probably cut ties with Keels sooner rather than later. Might they, keep him on a 2-way contract this season? I suppose, but I wouldn't be shocked if they go in a different direction. We mentioned the QJ Petersons and the other so many talented players on this planet, guys in the CBA or the Spanish ACB, putting up big numbers against great competition. That the competition for even those 2-way spots is getting more and more intense. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, on Keels real quickly, it makes me wonder with him, like, one of these players are going to start reevaluating, whether one and done makes sense for them. Like there's such an influx of draftees every year now that are 1-year guys that did college in 1 year. And, I sit there and I wonder, like, maybe these guys would have benefited playing another year or 2 in college. And I know sometimes there's a financial situation that's tied to why they want to go play pro, whether they get drafted or not. Sometimes they just want to start a professional career in Europe or wherever it's going to be. But with the NIL, and of course, Keel played at Duke, so he could have cashed in a bunch on NIL. Like, he just looks like a guy to me that needed more time. Like, he was not this guy who was this top 10, top 5 recruit coming out of high school. He was a top 40 guy. Like, he kind of surprised in terms of how well he adapted to college basketball quickly and how he was able to make an impact. But I think he might have been better suited playing more years at Duke, and maybe he would have been a much more ready player in the NBA. Like, I feel like if Keels is entering the NBA this year and, okay, he's having these struggles, you can live with it. But no, he's a year 2 player, but he's 20 years old. Like, I don't know how, if you're the Knicks, you can't wait forever for this guy to turn around, but who's to say he can't eventually turn around? But when you're a second-round pick, the clock is ticking almost as soon as you get onto a team. You got like a 2 or 3 year deal for a lot of these guys. So with the Keels thing, I just wonder if these guys are going to start thinking about maybe doing more time in college.
I would just push back by saying, did Keels actually make the right decision by coming out early? Because he might have been exposed had he stuck around for another fees. Like
Yeah.
Two-way, he got drafted in the second round. A two-way contract pays you just right over $500K based on for the season, based on how many games you play for the NBA club. I'm sure he could have made some money for NIL money had he starred for Duke, sophomore or junior. But chances are he wouldn't have made that $500,000. Coming out of the league, I don't know if he would have made it up. But he also took the not drafted. Then you're in trouble. Then you can play overseas. So it's interesting. And the NIL thing makes it a little bit more complicated. But
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to look at. But Knicks finished 2-3 again. I think Brown and Daquan Jeffries, who only played one game. I think those guys will have real shots at that final spot, and we'll see if Knicks end up adding anybody else for that.
Well, actually, the 14 include Daquan Jeffries and Isaiah Roby.
Oh, Jeffries is there, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so,
they're partially guaranteed, but yeah.
Yeah, so Brown, so Brown right now, you would think probably has the inside track on that 15th spot, but I guess we'll end up seeing. So we'll end here with it feeling like 2021 all over again, because we're once again talking about Trae Young and the Knicks. So Draymond Green sat down with Trae Young for his live podcast. We're part of the conversation, delved into Trae's relationship with the Knicks fans and Trae's, maybe in Draymond Green's eyes, his unfair label as a villain. Here's what the Warriors forward said on the Draymond Green show about Trae Young and his situation with Knicks.
And the reality is, I feel like where that all was birthed really was the series versus the Knicks, where everybody in New York Knicks fans are delusional and miserable. And I love New York, so don't ban me from your city. But they're hard. They're a hard fan base. You go in the Garden, you hitting the shots, you bowing every timely shot you need to make. You're making every play. And what I actually think now, and continuing to watch and continuing to pay attention to it, is you are very much so a showman.
So he says, Trae is a showman, but then that got flipped in him being a villain, and he thought that was unfair. So here's Trae's response in terms of like how he felt about that whole villain mold that he kind of got, in his opinion, I guess, thrusted into
that. Like I kind of feed off the crowd. Like if you were listening to the game in the 10 minutes left in the first quarter of game 1, the whole arena was yelling F Trae Young. So it's like, what do you want me to do? Like I'm just hooping, I'm playing. I ain't said nothing to the crowd. I ain't bowed. I ain't say it's quiet as F in here. I ain't said none of that yet. Like I just really played off of how they guarded me and how the fans reacted. Like I come out playing, trying to win, trying to put on a show. And I mean, if the fans want to get into it, like with the Boston thing, like they started.
Yeah. So that was Trae talking about the whole situation from the Knicks, and they ended up continuing the conversation talking about the Boston Celtics, Draymond's issues with the fans, them, and he played the Celtics just this past year. So on the Draymond front, Knicks fans are effing delusional and miserable. Do you think Draymond was right about his characterization of Knicks fans?
Yeah, they're fans. That's what they're supposed to be. That's what the term fanatic do. I don't see he's insulting the fans because they root for their team and they root against the guys they're playing. I never put too much credence into what Draymond says. He's looking to generate. He's hoping this clip goes viral, and I hope Knicks fans don't get mad at me when he is praying. Knicks fans get mad at him and tweet at him and bring up his name, and that he can somehow parlay that additional interest into views on his podcast or whatever the case may be. So listen, are Knicks fans miserable? Yeah, Knicks fans haven't won a title in 50 years.
Exactly.
If they wouldn't be real fans if they were happy because their team has gone past the first round of the playoffs once, twice this millennium. They wouldn't be paying attention, or they wouldn't be true fans if they were content and happy and happy-go-lucky and who cares if our team wins? We're just happy to be here. That's not the description a New Yorker. It's not a description of a New York fan. It's not a description of a Knicks fan. So I wasn't sure exactly how that was to be perceived as an insult. That they're very invested in their team. Somehow that's bad, I guess.
Yeah, Draymond, again, like I said on Twitter, he opens his mouth about stuff that he does nothing about quite often. Yes. I think this is something right along those lines. I mean, like, again, this is a franchise that hasn't won championships since the 70s. This is a team that has not been to the finals since 99. Very little playoff success in the new millennium. Like, again, do you expect them to be a happy fan base? I don't know. Like, with the Sacramento Kings, maybe the Sacramento Kings were happy not making the playoffs over the years. Maybe that's what he's comparing them to. I don't know. But I didn't quite understand that. And the delusional side, like, I don't know. I just think that, to me, like, what I hate about the conversation about Knicks fans that usually aren't around Knicks fans or not including Knicks fans are the caricature that has become of the Knicks fan because of select individuals who have been able to monetize being miserable and being a sad sack fan and monetize being an analyst who can go out there and talk about how miserable they are, even though they're not really fans of the team. Like, what they've learned is that there is actual value, monetary value, in being associated with with the Knicks and being associated with being a Knicks fan. And they've taken real misery and real frustration with the fans and have turned that into ways to market themselves. And what we end up seeing is just the worst kind of caricature of Knicks fans, when in fact Knicks fans are maybe the most knowledgeable of the NBA, of the most fan bases. A lot of stuff when you talk about delusion, a lot of it is reporters saying things are going to happen that then don't happen. That's not the fans' fault. Like, they're just reading what reports are saying. They're not saying a fan didn't come up with a theory that Kevin Durant was going to join the Knicks. It was reporters saying that Kevin Durant was going to join the Knicks. That doesn't make the fans delusional, But because nobody cares about the details, those little things get thrown aside, and it's just like, oh, look at these Knicks fans out there talking crazy. That's how they are. It's like, no, that's not really the case. Like, if you're just looking at the select few on Twitter who want to send RJ to the G League or want to tear down Julius Randle's picture, you think, oh, this is everybody, and it's not even close. It's not even close.
Yeah, and on one end of the spectrum, it can't be delusional. It's hard to be delusional and miserable at the same time, because if you're delusional, that means you're gonna. Exactly. That means we're gonna get Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic and Giannis, and that'll be our starting five.
Exactly.
But then you also can't be, yes, I agree. Every face, if you pick and choose, bring up a comment from some idiot who wants who says RJ Barrett's the worst player ever, and then you could bring up a comment that says RJ Barrett is better than Jordan 4 years into his career, so just give him time. Like, the truth is, it lies somewhere in the middle, and that's the kind of the beauty and the curse of social media. It allows folks to kind of as you mentioned, especially individuals that play into the biases and the characters. They can want, but I think for the most part, the Knicks fan base, as you know, is relatively knowledgeable, and it's often the again, I forget what the percentage is, but of all Twitter comments, 85% are made by 3% of all Twitter users, and that's just kind of an analogy for the fandom as a whole. You can't base what especially certain high profile Knicks fans say. And, a lot of that, and that is broadcast out into the mainstream media as the opinion of the Knicks fan, when that's probably as far from accurate as possible.
And to me, I think part of the reason why these players and Draymond Green can't relate to Knicks fans, it's a little weird because he plays for a passionate fan base, but so many of these guys, like, I was, I literally, and we'll talk about Trae in just a second, but I was watching the Reggie Miller versus the Knicks documentary yesterday. I'm reading Blood in the Garden while I'm here on vacation. Like, there was a symbiotic relationship with the passion of the players who play for their teams and the fans in those cities that doesn't exist anymore. These guys look at it as just a job. They look at it as just a check. So they look at the fans as, again, delusional, miserable, whatever, and they don't understand the fanatic aspect because they don't have that same, blood and loyalty and connection with these franchises in these cities And maybe they shouldn't have to. Like, again, like, we've talked a bunch about players can get cut and traded and there's no loyalty. Like, I'm not saying that they have to, but I think their lack of understanding is because they don't have that relationship anymore with these franchises. And staying on Trae Young real quick, I was just watching this, Reggie Miller versus the Knicks documentary, not expecting Trae Young to talk about this thing again. But, like, it was crazy watching that. And I'm sitting there with my girlfriend and, like, I'm telling her, like, this is, like, this is what it was like in the 90s. And then, you know about Trae Young, like, this is who they compare Trae Young to. And she's like, oh, no, this is way worse. This is different. This is, like, even she could see how different that rivalry and that hatred was and the kind of villain Reggie Miller was and then who Trae Young is. And I just am tired of Trae Young. And I guess he was asked a question, so he has to talk about it. But I'm just tired of talking about Trae Young and one playoff series where he outplayed Elfrid Payton and Frank Ntilikina and Reggie Bullock. Like, enough. Like, I just watched a series where Reggie Miller's going against Patrick Ewing, John Starks. He's going against tough guys who are longtime veterans, all-stars. And we're putting Trae on the pedestal of Reggie, and the best guy he played against was Reggie Bullock. That's who was guarding him for the majority of this series. And we're saying that this is equal. Like, enough of Trae Young and the Knicks. And I'm sorry about Trae Young and this sad sack answer of, well, I didn't ask for this. But, okay, but then you show up at Madison Square Garden on WWE SmackDown to be the villain on the wrestling show. You made money that way. You're selling, you're putting your sneakers out. You're wearing your sneakers with the King of New York or King of Broadway. That was that corny line you had on your sneakers. To promote your sneakers, you're wearing your King of New York sneakers on your game in New York. Like, you can't have both ways. Like, these guys cry so much, but then want to have and reap all the benefits of playing into that same role. Like, Trae, just say, yeah, it happened. It is what it is. I got love for New York. And that's it. Why does it have to be this whole, I didn't ask for this. I don't know why people hate me. It's just like, enough, dude. Enough. You beat Reggie Bullock. You beat Frank Ntilikina. Come on.
Also, to be a villain and to kind of be on that plateau, on that era of guys, and have a little more success. Last 2 years, Trae Young has been not good in the playoffs. Lost in the first round both years. Shot under 32% in 2022. Shot 40% in 2023. Last 2 years combined. What are his percentages here? In the 11 games he's played, 37% field goal percentage, 27% free. So score and be more efficient, lead your team to victories. That's the way to kind of earn the respect and the ire, because you can have it as a badge of honor. But a lot of Knicks fans aren't thinking about Trae Young now. They're thinking about Jalen Brunson, or Jimmy Butler, or teams that they're competing against. Get in the postseason, the actual playoffs, win a round, and then we can, get into that. Hopefully they play each other. They're the 4 and the 5 seed, and
if it becomes that kind of rivalry, great, and then embrace it. Like Reggie, I'm watching clips of Reggie Miller talking about Charles Smith being like, that's the smartest thing Charles Smith ever said, and talking about John Starks being like, I don't know why John Starks so mad. I didn't say much to him. Like, I saw Reggie Miller embrace that role. But again, it's like this era athlete is so different. Like, they don't want any of the smoke, but they want all of the adulation and all of the attention. And it's so frustrating and it's so annoying. And I just feel like it's crazy that, like, again, Trae Young beating Reggie Bullock is then become this. Like, it's not something we should be talking about for 3 years. Like, in the moment, was it great? Yes. Was it fun? Great, whatever. Like, 3 years later, like, he didn't beat a championship team. Like, the Knicks team that's there now is like totally different than that team. We so moved on from that era, and yet somehow Trae Young's still stuck in 2021. Like, I don't understand it. And I don't know why people keep having to talk about it, because Knicks fans aren't. It's always someone else bringing up Trae Young and the Knicks. Oh, we'll see what this is. Like, no one cares. By the way, the Knicks have basically mauled the Hawks every time they played them since that series. So that's another important thing to note as well if we're talking about actually building a rivalry.
And the Knicks have a better point guard, for what it's worth.
And that too. And that's a great place to leave it. Thank you guys for listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, and Audacy WFAN original, a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. And also be sure to check us out on YouTube, or you can find us on the WFAN channel. You can watch our full episodes there. Tommy, let the people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter, and subscribe to that. It's on Apple News.
Absolutely. And you can follow me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And for more content like this, oh, actually, let me try it again. Okay, I was about to read the parentheses. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.